webinars, and this one is going to be a little bit different in a few ways. So first, we've been using this platform for a while now, but they just added new capabilities with webcams and VoIP. So things may be a little weird as we're still kind of working that out. So bear with us as we experiment a little bit. And then second, normally I just function as the MC, but in this case, I actually am a director and an investor in Veriglif, one of the companies the company doing the webinar today. So I may take a more active role than I normally do. And also, momentarily, we should have another member of our board, Rolf Swinton, joining us as well, but he's still getting in. So the way this is going to work is I'm going to hand it over to James Wilson, CEO of Veriglif, in a few minutes. James is going to take you through the presentation. Then we're going to shift into a discussion and also Q&A. Now, to do Q&A, there should be a button to the upper right of your screen where you can submit questions, and that's where we'll take them as we go through, move into that portion. So this whole thing should last just shy of an hour. It will be being recorded. You'll get a copy of the recording or a link to look at the recording in a day or so. Again, you're on mute. Use that Q&A screen to submit your questions, and then we will go forward from there. So again, Rolf may be popping in after we get started, so we'll circle back around to Rolf, and we will go ahead and get the show on the road and start with a conversation with James. So James, introduce yourself and take us through all of this.
Definitely. Thank you, Len. I appreciate it. So I'm excited to share with you the results of a trial that we did early this year. So just as a quick introduction, my name is James Wilson. I'm the CEO of Veriglif. Veriglif has been around for a couple of years now, but my background is primarily in the tech industry. I've been doing a number of tech startups, about five now for the last 20 years. And I've been in the market research industry for about 12 years now, which has gone way too quickly. But I appreciate everybody jumping on today. I was quite surprised at just how many people were interested in this topic. It is in some ways, it is some ways repetitive how we keep talking in the industry about how we need to improve the experience. But we're going to share with you a practical example about a tool that we developed that we believe goes a long way to help that experience, which leads to better quality data. Now, it's useful for us to give you a background on Veriglif so that it can make sense as to why we did this particular trial. So we'll get through this reasonably quickly, and then we'll share some of the results with you. So just in summary, Veriglif is a blockchain and smart contract powered personal data marketplace. We validate individual records across multiple sources. So this ability to virtually merge these data silos creates efficiencies, especially from the fact that we have a single interface to many suppliers for the same record. So with permission and full transparency, these records can be used for in real time for a variety of use cases, targeted advertising, survey, sample, data enrichment, to name just a few. Perhaps our uniqueness, and there's lots of components to our platform, but perhaps our uniqueness really comes down to these two items, is that we incentivize consumers fairly. We pay minimum wage for them to participate, and we give full transparency and very clear controls so they can control the who, what, where of how their data is used. And we provide the buyers, with identity verified and privacy compliant first-party data. So we use just going back to why we use blockchain smart contracts to allow those individuals to really control the finite controls around how their data is being used. And we store transactions around who actually has bought the records in the blockchain as well. And so that's an immutable permanent record. You know, we know companies like Google and Facebook use large amounts of data for advertising, and without really fairly compensating users. There's a court case right now, in fact, with Google about using data when people thought they were in incognito mode. Back in 2011, the World Economic Forum classified personal data as a new asset class. And so we're making good on that promise to ensure that it's valued as such. So the fundamentals, the fundamental idea here is that we're structuring the personal data economy, and we're upending this dynamic for good. So why we do it? Well, we all know that personal data is extremely vital in the economy, but the supply and demand side equation haven't seen eye to eye for some time. Users aren't typically fairly compensated, either no compensation or very little compensation. And there's not a lot of protection around their sovereign rights. Think about the time that you have clicked on a checkbox somewhere that says, yes, you can share my data and access my data and share it with other companies. There's not a lot of control around what that actually means. Who are those companies? How do I undo that? How do I opt out if I want to? And so this mutual disrespect, as I like to refer it to, has led to this ever-growing distrust and disdain for consumers. Consumers are increasingly knowledgeable about how they're being commoditized, and how they're not sharing in this vast amount of profit that these companies are making. We know that big data was supposed to be the solution, but these silos of data sources are woefully inefficient. We know that third-party cookies, for example, in the advertising industry, are going to be completely phased out by the end of this year, and perhaps at least by the middle of next year. And so the only real viable solution is a real-time data graph of first-party data. Interconnected first-party data is the only real viable solution there. So how we do it, there's 4 key functions to our network. First of all, we validate a user's identity in real time. And so we build up what we call is a confidence score around how many matches a record has been matched against other records in the network. And those records can be third party or first party, but we build up this confidence score. So one record that matches with 3 other sources has a higher confidence score that it's a real record than a single orphan record by itself that doesn't match with anything. And so this real-time data graph that is matching across these sources builds this confidence score. So we validate individuals that way. We link data from various sources in a scalable manner. So we are not a network that is saying, upload all your data into our network. What we are saying is, give us your identifiers on those individuals, and we will be able to link one individual across 3 or 4 different sources. So the data remains where it is, but we use identifiers to actually virtually and programmatically combine those sources into a single record, even though the data stays where it is. And so that's an important fact is that we call ourselves a network of networks. So we connect up all these various networks of data sources, which is very important. If you've got one source that's got information on somebody's buying habits, another source that's got information on somebody's opinions and so forth, combining those together obviously gives you that more holistic view. But we are leaving the data where it is so that it can be constantly refreshed and updated in its own platform. The third thing we do is we create a catalog. So once we've identified that this individual is spread across 3 different sources, we create a catalog of what's available. And then lastly, we allow you to interact and transact with those records. So buy it, use it for sample targeting, use it for offline analytics, use it for advertise targeting, whatever it may be. There's a number of use cases that we allow. So now I'm going to share with you a trial that we did. So just a little bit of background. So in the early stages of the COVID-19 pandemic, most of our partners started to focus internally, and it was really about cost cutting and revenue protection, right? It was survival time. And so we set about helping a partner, however, to grow revenue in the middle of last year. And so this partner of ours interacts with about 6 million individuals a year. So they make about 500,000 phone calls every month. And they were looking to leverage that first-party interaction with other income opportunities. And so we did a soft launch with them where we invited their customers at the end of the phone call to opt in and join the Veriglif network. And to our pleasant surprise, we had about 60% of individuals who opted in to control and profit from their personal data. So we had this growing network of members, and we set out to improve the experience of taking surveys. And improve. We found that because the completion rate or the rejection rate rather was so high, even with programmatic matching, and because there were so many middleware routers between the marketplace and the actual survey platform, asking the same pre-screening questions, that only after 2 or 3 surveys, some of our members were giving up and dropping out and never coming back. And so the experience was not what they expected, and we were quite embarrassed about sending them into these opportunities. So even after we'd gone through all the process of matching their profile and perfectly send them into an opportunity which had a 100% match, the rejection rate was still woefully high, and there was still so much repetition of being asked the same questions again and again. And so then we set about really working out how we can improve. How we can improve on that, how we can make sure that users aren't being asked the same questions again and again, and that their experience is great, that it's quick, that they're being promised what they've been given what they've been promised. And so we built a browser extension, but it's also in a mobile application, which is shortly to be released. And so in order to accurately match members with the best opportunities, you need to have a complete profile on an individual, right? So if there's an opportunity in a marketplace that's got, all these different criteria or qualifications, you need obviously all of those questions in your profile on the individual. And so however, what we found though is that by asking more questions during the sign-up process and in all these pre-screenings before someone gets into the survey, it caused our members to drop off and lose interest exponentially. And so we needed a way to passively and transparently profile our members in the network in a way that they were aware of what we're doing, they're aware of what we're capturing, but to do it in a way that wasn't invasive, wasn't repetitive. And so just a little bit of a background: when a panel sends a member into a survey marketplace, it's also largely a black box. So what comes out is a status of whether they've completed the survey or not, and occasionally some pre-screening questions if they were asked by the marketplace itself, but not if they were asked by additional routers or in the actual questionnaire itself. And so because of that, there's a lot that's unknown about what actually happened. Was that survey mobile friendly? Was it difficult to complete? Was the link broken? Did they just simply give up? Were there multiple middleware routers sitting in between the marketplace and the survey, each asking more pre-screening questions and taking their slice of the CPI? Were there additional qualification questions that were not listed up front? We found that quite often in our examples that an opportunity marketplace might list, okay, I'm looking for males or females between the ages of 18 and 65. So, basically everyone. And then when we sent our members into it, because we programmatically matched and sent our members into that survey, then there was other qualifications that weren't listed that meant that their rejection rate was quite high. Other questions about this black box, is that did the member answer a question differently between one survey that they'd taken previously or not? So, have they, experienced survey takers kind of can guess what are the qualifications. When you're asking somebody, do you work in any of the following industries? They kind of understand what you're getting at. And so, but what is often not known in this black box scenario is, well, did they actually change their answers between surveys just to get past these qualifications? Another question could be asked is, did the actual survey that they were taking actually try to recruit them into another panel? You think about from a panel's perspective, they spend all this time and money to find that individual, to find find this opportunity, and then it's quite disappointing to find that at the end of some of these surveys that they've been recruited off to another panel, and so taking away those opportunities from the individual. And so we set about to address some of these issues. So with this browser extension that we built, we did a trial on it internally with our own members and also with a partner. We captured about almost 5,000 surveys. And what we found interesting was really just how many repetitive questions. We actually got a first opportunity to really see what was actually happening in this scenario and trying to address some of these issues that I mentioned. So the solution it's really got three main components. I mean, it has lots of other use cases, but the plugin, it detects. So looking at the first item there, it uses AI to categorize and autocomplete pre-screen and survey profile questions. So if a user has been asked again and again, what is your gender, what is your birth date, what is your zip code, again and again, and in our experience, it happens sometimes 3 to 5 times before someone gets into a survey, then our system is able to look at the individual's profile and auto answer that question, even if the question is asked slightly differently. And that's why we use the AI to actually detect what is the actual question being asked. There are many ways of asking the same question around, what is your gender, or the question might be just gender or sex, or what is your gender, or please enter your sex, or there's lots of ways of asking that. And so we use AI to categorize all of these profile questions and to auto-complete it from the individual's profile. and that saves them a lot of time. The second main feature of this extension is that it captures and auto updates the member's profile. And so what I mean by that is as we are detecting that they've just answered a question, it might be household income, and we haven't asked that on the onboarding process, and they've answered that question, we are capturing that and storing it back into the profile so that the next time that they're being asked, it can auto-complete, or when we're actually trying to programmatically target them, we can understand that extra question. And so what we did on our example is we only ask 3 questions now on our members when they join up. It's just, obviously we ask for an email address and some contact information, but the actual profiling questions are just gender, zip code, and gender, zip code, and birth date. Sorry, and so just asking those 3 questions. But what we do is we build up then over 5 or so surveys. We are able to really complete out their profile and get 20 more profile questions are being captured. And so the advantages of that, I mean, there's lots of advantages, but some of the obvious advantages are you've got a real-time profile now. So if someone's zip code changes, you've now got an instant update on it. If somebody's income changes, etc. And there's a real cost in panels having to go out and incentivize their members to actually update their profile. And so by doing this, it saves time and money, and it's what our users expect. They expect that if they're answering a question on a survey, and that survey they expect that there is integration between what they're answering and their actual profile, and so it's what they expect. They expect when they answer that question not to have to answer it again. And the third main benefit of this profile, it really gives full transparency and provenance to the member and to the actual panel about what has actually happened. So in this screenshot here, you can see when you click on the Veriglif icon, it shows you a list of the surveys that you've completed from one of our 100+ supported platforms. And when you click on it, it actually goes in and shows you the actual URL, the date and time, obviously, and what question and answer you actually answered. And so that gives you, imagine the challenge of actually asking a survey platform or a marketplace to actually remove all your data, the right to be forgotten, actually trying to track down all of the actual sites that were involved just completing one survey. You might have gone through 5 different platforms to complete that one survey. And so we've got the provenance now that tells you exactly which surveys and what data you've actually given to them. And so they're the three main benefits. Now you might be thinking, well, if I'm programmatically targeting an individual and sending them into a survey where I've perfectly matched their profile, then that's not a problem, because they're not going to be asked the same question because I've programmatically targeted them. The problem is that typically there's 2 to 5 of these middleware sites that sit between the marketplace and the survey that actually ask the same question again and again, and they're not well integrated. And so they even though you've provided a link and it includes, it might have in the link, it might have your zip code of the individual that's about to do the survey. When you go into the actual link, it goes to another middleware, and by the time you've gone through, it's asked you 3 times, what is your zip code? You might think that, well, cookies are the answer, because if I've already answered the question, then my cookie can can prompt the actual platform that I've already answered this. The problem is that there are hundreds of survey platforms, and each of them need to ask that question once in order to actually be able to remember it. And so in our experience, however, our users are only trying 2 or 3 times of a bad experience before they give up. So this idea of being able to just remember through cookies is not viable. People don't keep trying 100 times so that you can capture all that extra information, and it gets out of date as well. So people's gender, zip code changes, etc. There's lots of profile questions that will change. You might think that, well, browsers have an autocomplete function built into them. When you look at some forms, when you're in a shopping cart, often your credit card information is remembered. That's only used in a very small number of circumstances. And it's typically like an email address or a credit card. If you're on a shopping site, it's not helpful in actual surveys. So when you're asking somebody even just their income question, browsers don't remember that. They don't remember what range of income they sit in. And so browsers do not autocomplete in a survey scenario. So in our trials, we actually found that 36% of time was spent by the individual just completing these profile questions. So you can imagine how happy they are to get that time back, to not actually have to complete those. So this slide here just summarizes the stats, and I apologize for it being a quite detailed mathematical slide here, but let me go through that and highlight some of the key takeaways from it. So the survey went for about 3 weeks in January. We had about 70 respondents in it. We captured 4,817 surveys, so just under 5,000 surveys. Now that sounds like a lot for 70 people over 3 weeks, but that also includes partial completes where people gave up. It includes rejections, terminations, and so it's about 3 attempts or completions per day per respondent. This particular trial, we did ask for members who were actually good survey takers, who had been taking surveys for some time, and so they were familiar with it. They were active in taking surveys, and so that's why it's about 3 per day. Of those surveys, the actual questions we captured about 8,500. Now, the most important thing here is the actual number of profile survey questions that may be auto-completed was 36%. So just to explain that, what that basically means is 36% of every single question that we captured was a profile question that didn't need to be asked because we could auto-complete it from their profile. So that's what I'm talking about. Imagine you get that time back. Imagine any of us could get 36% of our day back. It would be a breakthrough, a 36% efficiency. And when we're begging people to take time to do these surveys, the last thing we want to do is waste their time and give them a poor experience. And there's lots of other things that we can improve on experience, but around just what it looks like and how easy it is to complete. But just from the time perspective alone, this is a huge breakthrough to be able to, dramatically reduce the amount of time that people spent. Now, the next point there, the number of profile fields analyzed, 29 out of a possible 160. Just to explain that one. So we have about 160 plus profile questions that can be captured. But in this trial, we only analyzed 29. The reason we did that is the AI needs vast amounts of training data, and 29, the training data dramatically drops off once you get through the sort of most popular profile questions. And the reason I put this in this slide is that once we get more training data and we increase that 29 to up to 160, then that 36% will actually increase. In other words, we will find more profile questions that people are repeating, but in our trial, we just limited it to a possible 29. Now, the number of respondents whose profiles were able to update was 94%. So we had about 4 users that only in the trial only did like 1 or 2 surveys, and so we weren't able to update them. But 94%, so almost every single respondent who participated in this trial, we were able to capture new information and update their profile. And on average, it was about 12 of the 29 fields. So almost everybody had almost half of their profile updated in this trial. And just a reminder, it's a real-time update. As soon as, within 100 milliseconds of the survey being completed, that is being pushed into the user's profile. Perhaps the second most important takeaway from this was just how much data inconsistency there were. So we found that of the 70 respondents, that 24 of them had at least one survey where the data was inconsistent. So it may not always be fraud, however, right? So fraud is one reason where somebody's looking at the industry that they've been asked and they're just changing the question because they kind of know what they're expected to ask. Which is important, and it does happen, and it's something that we need to look at. But there's other reasons as well as to for the data inconsistency. When we drilled into some of this data, we saw that, for example, someone's birth date month was December, and they had just quickly clicked on a drop down and chose November. And so sometimes it's just laziness; they're just quickly going through, and sometimes the actual option is not available. I remember looking at the answers from one survey. The individual didn't work in the automotive industry at all, and it asked them, which area of the automotive industry do you work in? Sales and service, and listed all these areas. And the option for their industry just wasn't available. And so sometimes it's poor survey design, sometimes it's laziness, sometimes it's fraud. But regardless of the reason, it highlights a really important point that in 34% of our respondents had a survey where their data was inconsistent, has incorrect data. And so now the top 3 inconsistencies that we found were, just scroll my page down here, were education, age, and household income. Now, age is probably one that you're thinking, well, it's because age is sometimes asked as what is your age in years, what is your age range. Our system, however, is able to still, because we have the actual birth date of the individual, we're able to, if it's a range, we're able to choose the exact range that age sits in. If it's just an age number, then we're able to auto-complete it just as an age number. So varying ranges don't throw the system out, but we still found those three top inconsistencies. This slide here shows you just a view of what the individual is able to see. So in this plugin, I showed you a screenshot before. It showed you a summary of all the surveys. This is the screenshot that you see when you click in and actually drill into one of those surveys. And so it shows you really transparently the exact domain, the question that was asked, the options that were presented, and the answer that it gave. And so, obviously we're capturing this extra information that's feeding back into the profile. The last thing we want to do is have the users not understand what is actually being captured on them. We're asking them to capture more so that their experience is improved, but we need to be extremely transparent about that so that there's no fear or anxiety around what's being captured. The user also has the ability to delete this data. So it's not shown on this particular screenshot, but there is a delete button. So if they can totally opt out and just say, okay, don't capture any of my surveys. I don't want to participate in this so that it's not updating my profile. But if it is turned on and after the fact that a survey is captured that they don't want, then they can just go back in and delete it, and we delete that back from the database. And so what we found in this, it's not shown in this particular screenshot, but it will be on the next slide. But you'll see how often there's multiple domains involved, multiple platforms involved in a single survey. And going back to that point that I made before, is the provenance around tracking that down is actually quite challenging. And so it's not transparent right now. So if you're a member of a panel, there's a checkbox somewhere that often says, yes, you can share my anonymous data with partners, but you don't really know where it's going. And so that's one of the things that we're improving in this, is more transparency about where your actual data is going. No, I apologize in advance. When I copied these screenshots, I didn't realize how terrible the actual copy and paste was when I've blown it up here. But if you can see, this just shows you more screenshots of the fact that the system captures anything from your birth date to your what industry you work in, to your state that you live in, etc. And all that is transparently. And in some examples, it's probably really hard to see, but you'll see there are multiple domains involved. So in the bottom right there, you'll see it's gone through SampleCube and Ipsos Interactive, and multiple platforms have been involved. And so that was really eye-opening to actually see just how many interactions are required and just how many repetitive questions are being asked of the individual. So back to the original premise of this presentation, which is about improving the user experience so that we can lead to better quality data. So our takeaways from this are really about removing screening questions is probably the most important learning from this. If we do so, in our experience, we will reduce the people's time by about a third. So a third of their time is currently being wasted. Let's reduce these screening questions or remove them completely. And the way that's done is by using the data that we've already got. So in our little trial, we're pulling from their profile, we're auto-completing it. And so reducing or replacing screening questions is vital to improving that user experience. Building real-time profiles. It goes without saying that obviously people's data changes over time. So almost all of the respondents' profiles in our trial were able to be updated. We don't have a large onboarding process, and that's important because it means that people drop off. If we're asking them to complete even 20 questions about their profile, even 10 questions, the more you ask, there's this exponential drop off. And so it's important to have this, real-time profile that's being updated, not just because it leads to drop off if you ask more questions, but because it keeps it live. Managing quality is another important aspect. As we replace these screening questions, we reduce the temptation for members to actually change their answers as well, right? So if you've got a question, if you've taken away that question that says, do you work in any of these industries, and we've just auto-completed it, or even hopefully even before they get into it, we've actually auto-completed and chosen not to send them this survey if they don't qualify. But if we've taken away that option, we've reduced that sort of temptation for them to change their answers. And so, and in our experience, we found, as you said, we found 36% of the time, 34% of users had some data that had changed. And so we need to improve on these ways of actually making sure that we've got consistent, good quality data. We're also able to build behavioral profiles. So this extension that we've built, while we're using it to capture profiles, it can be used for a vast range of other things in a transparent way. That's not possible before. So right now, as I mentioned, a sample provider who is sending somebody off to a third-party site doesn't really know what happens. So we get much more information, but we're also able to capture other information, what sites the individual goes to, what purchases they've made. Transparently, of course, we show the user what has been captured, but that allows us to build up this better behavioral profile. Imagine being able to track somebody's voting history, for argument's sake. That longitudinal behavioral profile is really helpful. So, and also about managing privacy is a really important thing. If we want to adopt some of these methods, which we strongly encourage, then it's important about being really transparent about what's being captured. So with a tool like this and other tools that we have, it's really important to show the user what we've captured on them, which builds trust, right? So we're moving away from this mutual disrespect where the experience is poor and the users will respond poorly to, no, we're actually going to show you what we captured. We've improved that. We're not wasting your time. And we're going to lead to more engagement. I mean, as an industry, do we really only want the people who are willing to put up with and keep trying to get through and complete these surveys when it's quite difficult? Or do we want to open it up to more of the population? That's really important point as well, is about the tools that we're building, not only to lead to better quality data on the individuals, but it opens it up to more individuals willing to participate. And in our models, we show that there's about a 3 times ROI. So it's because of a number of reasons. It's improvement on people willing to participate. It's an improvement on the fact that we don't have to spend time incentivizing individuals to update their profiles. There's a number of reasons why, but in our model, it shows about a 3 times ROI. So our job at Veriglif is to reverse engineer and deconstruct the existing system to find ways to address these and improve these challenges and bring them into production. But last slide here is, look, everything that I've spoken about today is available in 2 offerings. We have a white labeled solution. So this browser extension in our trial, we white labeled it with some of our partners, put their brands on it, put their colors on it, everything. We also have a core network that is a business-to-business network that allows you to use the network to get more information, to buy and sell personal data. And so what that means is, if you're trying to enrich your existing database, you can use our network to pull from and see what else is available on those individuals. Or you can use it to push data back in and sell through the network. So if you're looking to do a trial, it's relatively straightforward for us. It doesn't require much at your end to do a trial of this browser extension. We can easily put your colors on it, we can put your logo on it, and we can push it out to your members. And there's a very, very, very simple bit of JavaScript that's put onto your site. So yeah, reach out to us if you'd like to do a trial with us. So that's the end of it. I think I'll turn it back to you, Lenny, and we'll see if we've got any questions.
Oh, that's great. And so thank you for all of that. In the beginning, we didn't get a chance to introduce Rolf Swinton. So now Rolf is there. Rolf, you want to introduce yourself real quickly?
Hi. Yes, Rolf Swinton. I currently director of data assets at GfK and have been very involved and interested in ways in how we can safeguard and make more transparent how we're handling consumer data. So great presentation, James. Thanks.
Thanks, Rolf. And also a advisor to Veriglif and one of the early brain trust here as well. So James, do you want to stop presenting? There we go. Yeah, yep. And that looks a little more like the Brady Bunch effect. Yes. So there are a bunch of questions coming in, but let's chat a little bit amongst ourselves first. And actually, Rolf, you didn't have a chance to go through all of this beforehand, so I would love to get your take, particularly from your GfK role, right? As you're looking at what we're doing and all that, what popped to mind for you?
Yeah, I guess so. The most macro level, I think, quality of data and ethically sourced data are things which I think are going to become incredibly, increasingly important issues. Right? It is so ever more challenging to know, are the people who are providing you data real people? Are the people who are giving you, are they are they professionals? Are they just regular people who are just giving their opinions? Or are they bots, of which become increasingly increasingly prevalent? And moreover, it's just a drag taking a lot of survey work, right? But when you see through just through the work I've been doing in data quality overall and figuring out how to work with panel partners, certainly seeing that folks that are really working hard on creating great experiences for panelists, the data is better. You can see it. You can see more objectively when you look at just comparing survey data. You see that people are straight lining stuff less. You can see people giving more thoughtful answers when they're generally given a better experience. And I think this is where Veriglif is setting things up to play so well. Is the more we reduce burden on people, the more we give people in control, even if they aren't going to spend much time managing their data profiles, but just giving people the option so that when they wake up one day and like, you know what, I just don't want to do this anymore. Or, what am I actually sharing? And as opposed to having a horrible nightmare of like digging through and what is all the stuff that Facebook's been hoovering up on my thing, I can actually go and see and like, oh, okay, yeah, I see how that's being used and I'm fine with that and I'm getting compensated for that. And I'm like, yeah, that seems just, right? It's a fair exchange of value. I think all these things, we've been talking about this for such a long time, but I think that the tipping point we're seeing really at the point of data quality. And moreover, there's been a trade-off, and I've had an opportunity to sit in forums with CFOs and CMOs together talking about data quality. The CMO is like, yes, we want better data. And the CFO is like, yeah, as long as it doesn't cost more. And of course, then price is beaten out quality often. But I think this starts to help drive that equation in a more favorable way where ultimately this will not cost more, but this will be providing that data quality. It will be providing it in a hygienic, trusted way, which is going to help tilt the equation in a way where the CMO and CFO don't have to duke it out. And I think that's super important. So really it's those three things. Ultimately, how do we make it for a better experience for people? That's paramount, right? Because then you get better data. How do you give people the trust and control over stuff? People are looking for that and being increasingly educated to do that. Apple's steps to help put people more in control is training a whole new sort of generation of all of us in terms of what to expect and how to give us control. And finally, the economics of this start tilting things back into behavior where it's not a trade-off. It really is. It's self-reinforcing. So I think this is really playing towards the trends of where we should all be. And it is just a matter of educating ourselves. Say, how can we take advantage of these new technologies, which are really very fundamental and really do provide an important shift. I guess just the last thing there is, having been involved in research and how technologies are changing it, certainly even getting people to change their behaviors, knowing that taking surveys on a phone is becoming more prevalent. And yet, how long has it taken for us to just adapt to changing survey design for mobile? Like, this is a change in thinking, but I think that's why this is such an important discussion. I think that's why I'm such a supporter and believer in what Veriglif's trying to do, is that everyone needs to be here. And so this is where the world is going. And so this is something to embrace rather than to resist or ignore, because this is really going to be where we all need to be. We all should be now. So.
Yeah. So glad you're able to join us, Rolf. So there's a lot of questions coming in, but actually I want to chime in because you made me think about something that kind of some of the questions may reference as well. I mean, let's be clear. We've all been in the industry for a long time, and everybody's aware of my role with Greenbook and Gen 2, et cetera, et cetera. And originally, from a Veriglif perspective, we didn't want to play in the end of supply or demand. We wanted to play in the value chain in the middle, right? For the types of reasons that James has shown here, right? We knew that there was a way to create efficiencies and do things better that were GDPR compliant, that were aligned with the emerging IT trends, cookieless world, et cetera, et cetera. And that's not to throw anybody under the bus, right? Because you said it, Rolf. The CFO says, "Yeah, I want everything, but I don't want to spend more. So our existing ecosystem within the panel, within the supply side, right, panel, effectively focused on that efficiency. So focused on how do we make things cheaper, faster, and better would kind of take care of itself, right? And that there's no condemnation in that. That was what had to happen from a business standpoint. And that unlocked a ton of value within the whole industry, right? DIY and automation and all of those things could not have occurred unless that had happened first. But now we've realized through the course of the last few years, especially, that that's important. And James, you said it. So how do we reverse engineer to make sure that those efficiencies stay in place, right? We don't sacrifice cost and speed efficiencies, but we need to increase quality and we need to increase equity for all the key stakeholders, especially consumers. And I think that is the people that we engage with, respondents. And that was really the switch in kind of thinking through this. And what we have found is that it's a tough sell. And not because people don't say, I mean, I've talked to every CEO of every sample company and every research supplier, and most of the heads of research of the major Fortune 500 buyers in the industry. We're all like, hell yeah, we love what you're doing. But there is such inertia to change. And that is one of the biggest challenges that we have to factor in as an industry. And Rolf, you said it, but this is where we need to get to. And if we don't internally, someone externally is going to. Yeah. And they're going to eat our lunch, right? So we have to overcome this and we have to do better. It can make sense financially. It makes sense legally. It makes sense for the respondent ethically. And the technology exists to do that. Now we just got to do it. And that's the hard part. That's the hard part.
I think just to add on to that, Lenny, as well, our focus has been how to make sure that everybody, all the stakeholders, like you said, in this benefit, right? So it's not just about, we do have a focus on fraud, and that's super important, but we also have a focus on transparency, and we also have a focus on improving the experience. It's a multifaceted challenge that we've got here around, one of the benefits we give to the buyers is more validation, more provenance around where they got their data from. But then we also give the users transparency and more monetization, right? So it has to be this, as we raise the bar for all stakeholders involved is our challenge. And so that's our goal.
Yeah. All right. So there's a bunch of questions. So let's shift gears, guys. Does anybody else have anything they want to make sure that it gets out now before we get moving to Q&A?
I'm good.
Rolf?
Yeah.
Anything else? Okay. All right. So we got a bunch of great questions. So and I'm just going to go down the list. So first from Michaela, pretty basic one. How do you ensure these are not professional respondents? Now, James, the pilot, actually, we were looking for professional respondents, really kind of by definition. So what about the opposite case?
Yeah, look, there's a lot more transparency. Obviously, we're telling the user what data is being given, but we're also telling the panel what data has been provided as well. And so, if a panel is trying to look for respondents that aren't taking 3 or 4 surveys every single day, then they can choose that, right? This extension tells them exactly what's happening and what surveys they're participated in. And so, look, we give that information back to the panel, and it's obviously used for update their profile, but they can use it to take out respondents if they're answering more than they should. It's also useful for them. This extension it captures and auto updates profiles from any survey they participate in. Whether they're across 3 or 4 different panels, and so you're able to detect, yes, if they belong to other panels. If you want to detect that, yes, you can do that.
Okay. Yep. One thing I would just say about this, and I think the professional respondent thing too, I think one of the things which is useful is really understanding there's professional respondents as such. We sometimes use it slightly pejoratively. I think what's helpful is if you understand transparently the nature of someone, maybe they're just really good and they're fine at taking surveys, but actually they're a perfectly good respondent, like someone who really provides good data in that. Excellent. Really, if you can eliminate the vast majority of questions you'd be asking over and over again, all the much more likely you're actually just going to get their thoughts in the matter, which is really what we're trying to do, right? So understanding a professional respondent versus someone who's gaming the system, I think are quite different things. And this is the sort of understanding that different dynamic, being able to profile people differently and be able to work differently. This is the incredible value you can start to unearth when you can understand this stuff. And you can decide how explicit or not you want to make these things, but this is the kind of analysis you can start to do with this data and make much better choices in terms of your analytics, as your approach, as your sampling, to understand these different kinds of people.
Yeah, and let's call a spade, right? If you join a panel, by definition, you're a professional respondent, right? You're opted in. Yes, pay me to take surveys. That's the nature of the beast. So that's a great point, Rolf. There's a difference between somebody who is doing it unethically or frequently, right? Or is gaming the system, as we saw some of the evidence of, right? That may be what we think of as the professional respondent, But the reality is, engaging people in a fair value exchange on a recurring basis, that's what we do, right? That as an industry, the vast majority of the research we conduct is with professional respondents. It's through panels.
And especially as the number of things, certainly what I look at is there's so many different ways to be able to pull together behavioral data. But I certainly feel much more comfortable just, as myself, as someone trying to asking people to share their data. If I would like them to share their purchase histories of places, their viewing history of places, giving them control about when they feel like no, or the parameters around that, I'd much rather them have control. But those people are professional. If we want them to be around for a long time, we'd like them to be part of a panel and sharing that data. But making sure they're doing that all with full knowledge, explicit consent, transparency, I feel much better. I know that my likelihood of repercussions for us having taken anything they weren't aware of goes down. So from a legal risk perspective, it minimizes that. But also it's just much more ethical, right? Everyone's clear. It just makes you go with certainty, so that everyone, certainly at GFK, you think of risk management, everyone's concerned about data privacy, data laws. People are explicitly opting in, and that just makes everyone that much happier, because those people are making a choice and a truly informed consent, not pseudo-informed. You've opted in sometime 1,000 years ago and no one forgot.
Right. And being paid, right? So again, let's bear in mind this California law. This new California law is respondents are gig workers, and therefore they must be paid minimum wage. So, this reverse engineering process that we've been trying to attempt to do. There's Kobe. That's our COVID mutt. COVID puppy, like so many other people got. Excuse me. We're paying people minimum wage based on minimum wage, right? Living wage, and that's going to be a challenge for the industry that we have to think through as well. Rolf, to your point, this ethical consideration, is also this fair value exchange compensation. All right, I want to move in another question. Bala asks a very specific question. Basically, blockchain is inefficient. Why are you guys different? So, James, so talk about how.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, definitely. So some versions of blockchain are extremely resource hungry and inefficient, right? So if you look at Bitcoin, right? So Bitcoin requires a lot of energy. It's not great for the environment, and it's slow. So think of blockchain in many instances as just a big old slow database. And so we are using, but there are many flavors of blockchain, and we're using a private, transparency controlled version of a blockchain. So IBM's they're one of the founders on Hyperledger. So Hyperledger is a private blockchain. That means that we run the nodes. We have the validation. We run multiple nodes, and we can prove that that the data hasn't been manipulated. But it also doesn't require the mining that other blockchains do. And so, in terms of its efficiency, look, we that's part of our IP. We've developed ways of working with a transaction system that is slow in a model where you need to respond within 100 milliseconds. And so that's part of our secret sauce around making those two worlds work together happily. Yeah. So that's why we. Yeah. Sorry, what was that?
No, I was going to say it's also we're cloud based, right? And blockchain is a piece of the platform. It's that core piece, right? James said, but the data resides on multiple platforms. They're native platforms, so we're using APIs for that. So that's why we don't think of ourselves. We're not a crypto play. We never thought of ourselves that way. I mean, may there come a time, some point where token or something makes sense. Yeah, not now. We use to use for, I think, what does better than most, which is supply chain management and transactional processing, record keeping. So
yeah.
Anyway, all right. Caitlin Murphy, love that name, Caitlin. So how does the verification process account for consumers whose demographic information does change? So
great,
we kind of touched on that, James. With that autocomplete process, how do we make sure people are updating? Well, it really did change.
Yeah, very good question, Caitlin. And I was meant to actually cover this in my presentation, but it basically is we have certain fields that are allowed to change within a certain time period. So someone's zip code can change, and I think our default rule is I think we started out at a month, but then the AI fine tunes that as to what's allowed. So in other words, it will flag somebody if their zip code has changed twice within a month. Lots of things can change, but it's really, did it change more often than we would expect is what we are flagging. Now, we're not preventing the survey as well. So we are flagging it and then sending that back to the panel to say, this is potentially fraudulent. You need to investigate it further. Now, obviously they can build some tools off that to automatically, prevent the next survey going out to the individual or whatever they want to do. But our job is just to flag it as this is a potential that you need to look at. So just in summary, it's looking at the frequency of change. So if someone's income is changing every day, then we're going to flag it. If someone's income is changing, more than once a month, then we're going to flag it. It's just, so we do allow change, but it's within an acceptable time frame.
And if they're one of our members, right, that native group that we built, inherently, we give them a chance to correct that, and so the profile is accurate as it changes. Oh. All right, Cal from Zappy, our good friends at Zappy. What impact does this type of mapping have on your ability to actively estimate feasibility of a certain audience? I'll address that. The bigger the profile, the better we can target, right? Or the more that we're linked in. So if we're dealing with our own native set of population, if we haven't asked the question, obviously we can't target on the question but since it is a dynamic and growing network and data profile, theoretically, over a period of time, we should be able to target on just about anything as long as they've been asked the question. And that also would apply to anybody plugged in from a network standpoint, any of our partners, right? As their populations plug in, as that data profile, that data graph grows, the ability to target grows and grows and grows as well. Our ultimate goal would be to the point where research is only based on asking the question we don't know the answer to. That's it. If we know the answer to the question, why the hell do we need to ask it? So that is the fundamental vision of where we can get to. We're not going to get there, tomorrow or next week or even next year, but the ability to pinpoint target based upon existing information is certainly the overall goal, the vision that we want to get to. James or Rolf, would you add anything to that?
No, that's great.
Okay. All right, Gene. From Taluna, VP of Supply Quality. So, Gene, I'm sure you're totally interested in this conversation. We love Taluna. What potential clients need to specifically allow this level of capture of their survey questionnaire designs? So that is an interesting question that has two components, I think. And then James or Rolf, you jump in here because we're kind of making this up as we go along, guys. So. Would the panel company have to permission it and engage your folks in saying, hey, this is going to happen? That's ideal. We think transparency is important. Is there a division between the IP of a client, let's say a Procter and Gamble, versus versus Taluna? Yeah, and I don't think we know what that looks like yet. I think that's an issue. The default position that we have taken is the GDPR one. And the California one, it's the consumer's data. So, that's the provenance. I don't think we as an industry have wrapped our heads or our arms around what that really means long term. And I think we're going to have to figure that out because it's going to become an issue. Rolf, GfK, you're in Germany. How are you guys dealing with that? Right? Of what's your data? What's client's data? What's the consumer's data?
Yeah, it's I think certainly from usually just held straightforward way with in terms of contracting being clear. I think generally it's like who's ultimately really paying for the creation of the data. Where you get a license to it, obviously, in a way, you're essentially now getting a temporary license to data because you're paying for someone, but they have a right to be forgotten. And so you respect that. You respect that someone is giving you a license. You control the license, and when you then pass it on to the client, it's also that license can be revoked for that particular data element. Usually, at that point in time, you're rolling it up into something anyway. It's anonymized and disconnected from the individual. So that's not such a big deal. But I think it's always super important, though. This is where this kind of becomes incredibly valuable, because your ability to control that then actually allows for more complex data products. If you're going to license respondent level data and you can control that and turn it off when need be, then suddenly your ability to create much more complex things becomes much more possible. And it is increasingly interesting for companies, I find, as people are building more and more complex data models. They want to strip out all of the modeling and weighting that's going on top of data. So if they can get access to respondent level data, to raw material, and be building up their own assumptions on that, they're much happier to do more complex stuff. And certainly when you're building any kind of AI, machine learning driven stuff, you want undistorted raw data at the bottom of it so that you're not having distortion. So this is really important. So being able to have that very transparent chain of ownership, being able to pass along control, that becomes, I think, pivotal to the future of a really healthy analytics system powered with AI coming in now. Without that, it's that we see all the problems that start popping up with distorted data.
Yeah, it's kind of. James, I'm sorry. Go ahead. What were you going to say?
Oh no. Look, I was just going to say it's probably important to highlight as well, Gene, actually what we're capturing. So typically a confidentiality agreement at the start of a survey will just say, look, you can't share any product designs or images or videos or anything like that. And that's not what we're capturing in this instance. We're capturing, our focus is obviously on profile data, and we only capture the survey question text and the options and the answers. So we're not hoovering up the whole design of the questionnaire. We're not taking any images or anything like that. So just a very small subset. But look, this is a question as Lenny and Rolf highlighted that the industry has been trying to tackle for some time, and we have adopted the approach of let's just be transparent about it. It's the user's opinions and profile and behavior. They own it, and we're showing them what we've captured, and we're being clear about that. Yeah.
And I think Rolf touched on this too. That compliance framework. When that last slide that James showed, there's two pieces of our business. One is B2B centric. One is kind of consumer centric. And that B2B piece is that compliance framework to, at least while we're working out these questions, ultimately of who owns what and who's licensing what. The system is in place to have that record in there. So while we're figuring out what the right model is, we've got 3 more quick questions. I may actually be able to tackle these. So Joanne from Vanguard, what's our business model? Can you come to us directly, or do you work for our partners? The answer is yes and yes. So I don't want to get into the pitch piece. We're happy to have a conversation with you, Joanne, directly on what that looks like. We do build proprietary populations for some clients. We think that we found people like that and want to use that. We also have a variety of integrations with partners. Either way, we can work through that. It is not our goal to be a panel company. That's not who we want to be. It's never our vision. No. But we do some of those things on occasion with some clients. So when it makes sense to do that. So then Julie asks, can this run on all devices? James, so right now it's Chrome and iOS?
Safari. Chrome and Safari at the moment. We've got an iOS prototype that's been built that will be released, very soon. So iOS obviously is a lot more complex than little browsers, but it's coming soon. So yes, it will run on almost all devices. The same technology that we're running in the plugin runs in the iOS. So soon it'll be on all devices.
And so Android will come after iOS, right?
Correct. Yeah.
So we're getting there. And Julie, also, is there risk of sharing proprietary info for our surveys with other suppliers? I think we touched on that. And Julie or Nielsen totally get that. Again, I think this is one of those things we're going to have to figure out as an industry, right? On a case by case basis. Our job is to make sure that the data is there, right? The provenance and ownership, I think, is between you and clients and everybody else in the ecosystem to kind of figure out based on legalities. But let's understand it is complex. California is different than Georgia, where I am. New York is different than both. So the EU is different than the UK. That this is a very complex situation that we simply know that if you create the record and the technology to manage that, that goes really far what that ultimate issue, what that ultimate solution looks like. And Anna, I think a similar question. Any clients preserve confidential survey data. At Disco, I think, Anna, we're still trying to figure all that out. So let's be clear. It is permission-based. So we don't have to capture everything. So our focus, like in the pilot, was on screening questions, not IP of core surveys. Can we capture all of that? We can. Is there a point of view that, as we've just discussed over and over again, who owns it? We're going to figure that out as an industry. But we are not forcing anybody into that. So the ability to turn it off and on is there. The system to store it and manage it and have that compliance framework is there. But we're not going to say, hey, P&G, we're going to capture all of your data whether you want to or not.
I think it's worth adding in as well, Lenny, that, I mean, our tools are also able to capture if there's a confidentiality agreement at the start of the survey. So we can capture the text that says this is a confidential survey, you're not allowed to share it, and then react to that. So at the moment, because we're only capturing the profile data, it's not a concern for us, but certainly we have the tools to be able to say, there is a clause at the start of the survey, don't capture anything else. So we use some AI to categorize that. But, if you're asking someone what their gender is and what their income is, that's not proprietary. So we're in a safe spot at the moment.
Yeah. All right. So we ran just a bit over, but those were great questions. This was a great presentation, great conversation. Thank you guys so much. Thank you to our listeners.
Thank you.
You'll get a copy of it. If anybody wants to reach out to us, feel free. You can always, everybody knows who I am. So if you have any questions, feel free to shoot me an email. I'll make sure James will roll for whoever gets involved. In the meantime, happy Monday. Everybody be well. Take care. Thanks.
Thank you.